Hello, everyone. Welcome to this webinar about climate change that the American Academy of Pediatrics and EcoAmerica are holding on this, the 50th Earth Day, and are holding in the midst of the Corona-19 pandemic. I want to thank the Climate Change Committee that has worked on moving the AAP climate change program forward. Parna Bowl, Samantha Adut, Susan Pacheco, Lori Byron, and Perry Sheffield. I also want to thank Cassie Bernardi, Tricia Calabrese, Paul Spire, Zach Laris, Lucas Allen, Deborah Waldron, and Fan Tate for their excellent work to staff all things climate change at the AAP. I want to thank the AAP Friends of Children's Fund for supporting the climate change work at the Academy. And I want to recognize our partner, EcoAmerica, for their partnership and support of many AAP climate change activities. I want to remind you that you're all muted during this time. The presentation will run for about 45 minutes, and I encourage you to type questions into the chat box during the presentations. While at the end, there will be about 15 minutes for questions and answers, and your questions in the chat box will provide the meat for that part of this webinar. Please don't use the raise your hand option in the chat box. Just type your questions there. And, just remember that depending upon your internet speed and things like that, there may be a little variation or delays in how the slides progress. And again, I want to thank all the people who worked so hard to make this event and all of the Academy's climate change work take the prominence that it has had. This is a difficult time. Is this time difficult because of the rapidly moving public health disaster that is the coronavirus pandemic? Is this time difficult because of the somewhat slower moving public health disaster that is climate change? Yes, and yes to both. Coronavirus has us worried about our patients' health, our own health, and the health of our families and loved ones in a way that few of us on Earth and none of us in the United States have any experience. Speaking for myself, I believe that the coronavirus pandemic has developed in part because of the marginalization of science and placing politics over science. The coronavirus pandemic demonstrates the fundamental and profound weaknesses of our public health system. The coronavirus pandemic demonstrates the fundamental and profound injustices in our healthcare and public health systems, in our housing systems, in our workers' rights systems, and a host of other factors related to the difference between the 1% and the rest of the population in the US and globally. Climate change has us worried about our patients' health, our own health, and the health of our families and loved ones, and the health of future generations of humans, other species, and the functioning of the Earth as an ecosphere itself. The same factors that have contributed to the development of the coronavirus pandemic have contributed to the climate change crisis, the difference being merely that of time scale. The solutions that we need to work towards for both climate change and coronavirus are similar, placing science over fiction. Specifically for climate change, we need to drive hard towards a carbon neutral future as quickly as possible over the next several decades. Our objectives for today are expansive, but our time is brief. We want to increase awareness and especially inspire action on climate change and children's health. We want to share information, ideas, and opportunities and best practices in addressing children's health and well-being amidst increasing impacts of climate change. We want to build leadership and capacity and collaboration to address climate solutions to protect children's health. Clearly, our work will not end today. We want all of you on the webinar to help us move forward to protect children's health and alleviate the environmental justice and health disparities that are so prevalent. This is Earth Day, and this is the 50th Earth Day. And we need to mark this time and use it as a springboard to further action to protect the health of children, all human beings, and this planet. Earth Day founder Gaylord Nelson came up with the idea for a national day to focus on the environment after Nelson, then a senator from Wisconsin, witnessed the ravages of a massive oil spill in Santa Barbara, California in 1969. This idea had support from Republicans as well as Democrats. Earth Day 1970 was to be a teach-in on the environment. 10% of the total population of the United States took to the streets, parks, and auditoriums to demonstrate for a healthy, sustainable environment the same things that we are working towards today. By the end of 1970, the first Earth Day led to the creation of the U.S. EPA and the passage of the Clean Air, Clean Water, and Endangered Species Act. By the 30th Earth Day, environmental groups and individuals in 184 countries linked together to expand that fight for clean air, clean water, and an overall healthier planet. By 2010, the climate crisis was recognized and the focus of Earth Day took on the adverse impact of climate change on humans and other species. Today, the 50th Earth Day, the American Academy of Pediatrics and EcoAmerica, as well as scores of others, are making the point that climate change is harmful to human health. I think that many of us on this webinar already know about the health impacts of climate change on children, but let me just mention some of them briefly. I think one of the most serious and underappreciated health impacts of climate change are the detrimental effects on mental health, whether it's anxiety about what's coming, whether it's post-traumatic stress disorder from events like hurricanes and tornadoes. Mental health impacts of climate change are huge. They are worldwide. They vary from place to place, as do so many of these other health impacts. And as a nation and as a globe, we don't do very well with managing mental health problems. Heat-related illness, whether it's adolescents out for practicing football, whether it's workers in fields or gardens around the world, whether it's infants, unintended left in automobiles, heat-related illness for those groups of people and for senior citizens are a serious problem related to climate change. We have seen and will continue to see changes in vector-borne disease patterns, whether it's tick-borne illnesses, whether it's waterborne infections. Climate change is changing the pattern of infectious diseases in the globe. We're also seeing more severe and longer seasons related to allergic disease, allergic rhinitis, asthma. All of these things are changing as a result of climate change. Droughts, floods, and other problems are bringing increased food insecurity in a world in which food insecurity is evident in many countries and will become a global problem if climate change is not arrested. There are solutions to this problem. There are solutions through health, and we will speak more about solutions as we move further into this webinar. I don't want to just make this sound like a totally bleak situation, but at this point, I want to acknowledge and invite our partner, Eco-America and Megan Spicer, to take over the presentation from here. Eco-America, with the leadership of Bob Perkowitz and Megan and others, Rebecca Rear, has been a wonderful partner with the American Academy of Pediatrics and bringing to the fore the issues around children's health and the environment. So at this point, I will turn it over to Megan.
Thanks so much, Jerry. And thank you to everyone who's joined today. I want to wish you a happy Earth Day. And I want to thank you for spending this time with us to dive into children's health and our climate. We hope you'll find this webinar useful and that you will also find some time today to spend some time in nature, of course, with a safe distance. So to begin, our partnership with the AAP was initiated several years ago, really with the intention to help deepen the engagement and strengthen the climate leadership among pediatricians. AAP has been wonderful in taking a leadership role on this issue, really understanding the impact on children's health and family health and well-being. So as pediatricians, you play a vital role in our communities. Not only can you treat the climate-related symptoms and illnesses of our children, but you can also help advocate for climate solutions with your peers, your patients, with parents, policymakers, really as critical to children's health improvement. So the AAP is an entire section of the website devoted to climate change, to helping you with tools and resources. So take a look at it. It's under the Advocacy and Policy tab, under environmental health section, from a commitment to climate leadership to videos, webinars, talking points, guides. And this webinar will be there as well. The site offers you tools and resources to help you impact our climate while at the same time increasing your impact on climate solutions advocacy. So a little bit about who we are as Eco-America. We are a nonprofit. We're dedicated to building public support and political resolve for climate solutions in America. And we have programs that support local communities, faith denominations, and of course, health associations. We collaborate with them to help them build, expand, and really diversify who leads on climate change in America and how they lead. Our health program is called Climate for Health, and through it, we support AAP and other health associations, really to help boost their visible leadership on this issue and engage you as members to help implement, so reduce our impact, as well as advocate for climate solutions. So in a nutshell, we've had a very fruitful collaboration with the AAP, helping them deepen their climate strategy, expand tools, resources, really to help you engage on this issue. And it's important to note that Americans need your leadership. At Eco-America, we do a lot of research to really understand where Americans are on the issue. I mean, our core focus is to help new Americans or people who have not yet engaged on climate to engage on this issue and see how relevant it is. And so we do a lot of research to really understand where they're at. And the good news is they do want a myriad of leadership. They really need it. And I really mean yours. This chart on the left shows a majority of Americans are concerned about this issue. 74% are concerned. If you add in a little concern, that makes 88% of Americans. That's most Americans are concerned, have some level of concern on this issue, including nearly half who are very concerned. We also asked this question of, do you think others around you are concerned? And only 59% of Americans think that others around them are concerned, and really only less than a quarter think that people are very concerned around them. So that is a huge delta, and it really speaks to the fact that people feel alone in their climate concern. And the antidote to all of this climate concern loneliness is to bring the issue to light, is to have leadership, is to have visible leadership on this issue, and not just from elected, but from you as well, from all of us. Although leadership from our elected officials is also very important. Our other climate perspective survey from January showed that 71% of Americans believe we need to elect leaders who will prioritize solutions, who will prioritize climate solutions, with over half strongly agreeing with us. And nearly 7 in 10 Americans believe that investing in climate solutions will secure American communities and make our country stronger. So those are real big, important data points that speak to the need for leadership on this issue, and that we all have a role in it. So what does climate leadership look like in this day and age of COVID-19 and the multiple crises we're facing right now with our economy? It's a time of distress, it's a time of uncertainty, and you're likely here because you're looking for some ways to lead. And so we hope to help this. As social scientists, we've studied what we're learning from this pandemic and how to adapt our climate leadership as a result. And so we've published a paper with the help of others, and that covers the learnings that we've had to date on COVID, as well as some guidance. And so first, the learnings. One is that we can tackle monumental challenges in this country. That's one of our most important lessons. We can muster society, policies, financial resources to quickly address problems with significant importance. And mainly that includes our climate emergency. I mean, Congress mustered up $2 trillion action plan to address COVID-19 in less than 2 weeks. Is it perfect? No, but they did it, and that is amazing, $2 trillion. Also, timing matters. I don't need to go into this. With quick action, we can nip COVID-19 in the bud. You see countries that acted quickly are flattening the curve, and countries that have not are really seeing the worst of it. And so the longer we wait to put our shoulders behind mitigating and preparing for the climate emergency, the more it will cost us both in lives and livelihood. Third, crises highlight injustices in society, and Jerry already mentioned this, but really COVID-19 is shining such a bright light on our health, economic, societal, and racial inequities that are embedded in our society. The disadvantaged among us are bearing the worst of it, and they certainly need more help and deserve more help. And so this is a moral responsibility and a moral challenge for us. COVID is, as well as our climate. Next, preparation matters, similar to timing matters. Countries that were prepared with good public health systems and pandemic-trained professionals, ready with testing and prevention and treatment equipment and supplies, are doing much more, are having much more lower incidence of COVID-19 and quicker recovery. So similarly, we must be prepared for climate with similar mastery. Next, science and facts matters. Jerry already touched on this. When we trust in our experts, when we trust in the science, it's critical for success. And that rings true both for COVID as well as climate. Our leadership must wake up to the importance of science and facts, specifically in our climate realities and in the opportunities for solutions. That leads us to leadership matters. With COVID-19, the prime ministers, presidents, governors, and mayors who acted quickly and made the right decisions reduced the impact, reduced morbidity and mortality. We need leaders to step up similarly as champions of information, plans, resources, and obviously solutions to effectively address our climate change. Next, transparency matters and honesty matters. Labeling the coronavirus as an emergency as such has triggered historic national and worldwide collaboration and action. And so we need to do the same for our climate. People have started talking about it as a climate emergency, and we need to treat it as such. Next, individuals matter. Most Americans are self-quarantining and they're making room for care and they're connecting with others even beyond their own family. They're providing this moral outrage that is forcing our government to act. As people as a priority. So the individual and collective actions have made government realize that social welfare is a primary responsibility, and that also translate into the need to address our climate. And these actions, of course, have all been made possible through your leadership. Climate Solutions will take us rowing together, and we are excited to be working with the AAP members and pediatricians everywhere to engage Americans on this issue and to engage our leaders on this issue. So next, how we lead. What is our guidance for leading? First, it's really about making room for multi-solving, to understand that so many of your fellow physicians and health officials and health professionals are on the front lines right now. And so those who can lead, please do. But also know that folks are really struggling right now. So first and foremost, make sure that we act and react with empathy and kindness in our personal reactions and interactions in our communities, and it's how we treat other people. The more we can build a more personal and broader sense of equity and justice in our work, the more that we will, really make progress. And it's really just simply the right thing to do, including listening well. Second, keep equity at the core of our response. This means to start with people, to listen and work from their priorities. It means prioritizing housing, food programs, and so forth. And certainly with our climate, again, as we noted, it is such an equity issue. We really need to see how voices need to be weighing in on solutions that aren't right now, and also that our solutions need to make sure that we have sustainable, shared, and equitable prosperity as we move into this new world. Next is base our decisions on facts, science, and experts. I'm sure that I don't need to belabor this point and that you agree with us, but it is the antidote to what we've learned through this situation. Fourth is inspire and empower and take action. This really is about making sure that people understand they have a role in this issue. Americans won't act on any issue if they think that it won't impact them or if they can't make a difference anyway. So we all need to really talk to our families, talk to our workplace, congregations, communities, and help the country move towards effective climate mitigation. And this really includes showing up for others in our communities. Next is elect good leadership. Primary to solving COVID is leadership that puts the well-being of Americans as an essential priority. So the most critical thing we can do right now is specifically for climate change, is to elect people who understand and will take the necessary measures to care for our health and our climate. Communicate and collaborate. We actually have all the money, technology, policy solutions we need to address climate change. But what we need are the people, the social tipping point. Activists alone are not enough. We need to reach out through our spheres of influence to motivate others to act, and to act together in collaborating for climate solutions. And last but not least is capitalize on the moment. While that might sound a bit rough, it really is time for change. What we're seeing right now is the need for change, and we need to act quickly. And so right now we're opening up space for rapid, massive social change. And by structuring solutions to these crises in ways that multi-solve for other issues, particularly those that are equitable, are equity-based, we can create self-reinforcing benefits. So we need to realize that we and our problems are interconnected and interdependent, and so are the solutions, and we must embrace our critical role as advocates for those. So there are opportunities to multi-solve, and Americans are recognizing connections in particular between children's health and climate. We know that when people understand that is impacting children's health, they act more quickly. We know that 9 in 10 Americans believe we have a moral responsibility to create a safe and healthy climate for ourselves and our children. We also know that majorities of Americans agree that that climate solutions will help prevent climate change, would help improve our health. And so if you see the two together, you see that America and Americans are ripe for climate solutions and ripe for that climate and children's health conversation. So we really encourage you to embrace your role as an advocate. Also, youth themselves are not waiting for permission to act on this issue. Youth advocacy is gaining momentum. They have internalized what climate means to them, and they are making sure adults know exactly what they're demanding. And they're making a difference. Our research shows that nearly 80% of Americans understand why the youth are striking, and they are striking right now. While it's virtual, they are striking. And over 3/4 of adults say that the striking makes them feel hopeful. So we must listen to the youth and support them, and even join them as allies, and certainly even support their online protests, which are happening now. At ECO America, we hope you join us in maintaining our resolve in leading on this issue. We are all of us are needfully focusing on the health and well-being of our families and adjusting to life under shelter-in-place orders. But for those of us who can still lead on this issue, let's please do maintain our resolve. You can sign up to be trained as an ambassador to speak effectively with others on climate and advocate for action. You can also get involved in climate events, many which are going virtually. We have an event coming up in August where Fan Tate, Chief Medical Officer of the AAP, is a featured speaker. We hope to keep it in person, but if not, we will go online for safety reasons. And we're even in discussions with the AAP about dedicating a forum to children's health and climate once we can safely gather again. So get involved. And certainly there's a lot you can do right now. There are sign-on letters that you can participate in, whether it's, there's one very specifically on COVID-19, climate and health. There's another one around green stimulus to rebuild our economy. You can participate individually and as organizations in these sign-ons. You can also plan ways to reduce your impact, to build climate resiliency and engage in climate advocacy with the help of the Climate for Health Moving Forward guide, also available through the AAP website. And you'll find additional resources to help you talk about the issue, have talking points as well. There's really just so much we can do. And I just want to thank you for, again, being here today, for joining in this effort. And I wish you all success and wellness. And I want to thank you for listening to me. And I'm going to hand it back over to Jerry, I believe.
Right. Thank you very much, Megan. And I want to thank ECO America for all of the important information that they bring to the table with their polling results. The convening that they do has moved this field forward, and I want to thank them again for the help that they've extended to the AAP. I'm very excited. We have over 100 participants on the call. I just want to remind you that the question and answer will be done through the chat box. So if you look on your screen somewhere or another, on my screen it's at the bottom, maybe on yours it's the top, you will see a blue circle, and inside of that a little bubble. And if you click on that, that will open up the chat box and allow you to enter your questions as we move along. I want to, there've been a lot of really exciting things that have happened in the Academy related to climate change over the last several years. And one of the most exciting has been led by Laurie Byron, and that's the creation of a cadre of climate advocates, individuals in each and every chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics who are dedicated to working on the issue of climate change. So I'm going to turn this over to Laurie. She will introduce the speakers, and we'll move on from there.
Thanks, Jerry, for moving the AAP forward on climate, and thanks to ECO America. But thanks especially to AAP for identifying climate change as a critical issue for children and choosing to emphasize this issue in the media. And thanks to the AAP for releasing and publicizing the beautiful climate stories this week from Gabe Ciceros of Pennsylvania, Amanda Milstein of California One, Bredia Huerto Montoyas of Puerto Rico, and Aparna Bowl of Ohio. Every major medical and scientific organization in the world has said that climate change is here, it's now, it's affecting human health, especially vulnerable populations like children, and it demands immediate and effective action. Those of you here today care about your communities and families and patients. The power of AAP is immense and broad-reaching, but the power of local and state advocacy, such as through our AAP chapters, can sometimes wield stronger influence on your state leaders and your members of Congress, especially in more conservative regions. And one must only look at Virginia in recent months to see the power of the state in this battle for climate action. Not only did they join RGGI and set a 100% renewable energy goal by 2050, but pediatricians through their AAP chapter and pediatricians and other healthcare providers through the Virginia Clinicians for Climate Action Group played a role. We can do such actions in every state, and we can make a difference, as AAP and pediatricians historically tend to do. Hence, COEH embarked on a mission about 6 months ago to find a climate-passionate person in every AAP chapter. After 5 months and a lot of help from a lot of you on the line today, that happened, and we now have 90 advocates with at least one in all of the 58 chapters. We've had 4 monthly calls to date to share ideas and inspiration. One advocate in a fairly progressive state told me that just the act of national AAP allowing these climate advocates to be identified lent more credibility to the issue of climate within her AAP chapter. Prior to beginning this endeavor, there were 9 AAP chapters with environmental health committees and 1, New Jersey, with a climate committee. We now have 3 new climate change committees, 1 new one just formed this morning, and several more are in process. Prior to this endeavor, we had one chapter with a climate resolution, Montana, and one, Utah, endorsing carbon pricing. We now have 5 more in the pipeline, with 2 already approved. We have one climate advocate subcommittee begun that you will hear about in a moment, and we have a number of Earth Day op-eds that have been submitted and printed. Many of these advocates were already doing great research and great advocacy related to climate, and some are amongst the most famous of environmental pediatricians. But a lot were not doing such actions with the power of their AAP chapter behind their name. Many told me they wanted to do climate advocacy, but they weren't sure what to do until now. Different advocates will do different tasks based on their limited time, their own passions, and their state's political dynamics, but they are already doing great things. It's my honor to introduce 2 of them, but there are truly dozens with a climate passion. Lisa Patel from California One is a pediatric hospitalist at Stanford University. She has a master's in environmental science from the Yale School of Forestry, and she worked for the EPA prior to becoming a physician. She is the current co-chair of California One's Climate Change and Health Committee, in addition to serving as a rotation director for pediatric residents at Stanford. She also helped start California Climate Health Now last year, and she was a former student of Jerry Paulson's. Becca Phillips-Bourne of Georgia is a primary care pediatrician interested in environmental health and climate change. She has a master's in environmental health, and she works with the PACU. She is in the nascent Georgia chapter of the Medical Society Consortium on Climate and Health, and she is at Emory in general pediatrics on the Grady campus, and also works with the Climate at Emory group. We will hear from Becca first.
Thank you, Lori, so much for that introduction. And I give kudos to Lori for the incredible momentum that she has built among pediatricians and the climate space over the last several months. So on one of our first Climate Advocates calls, where she brought all of us together, Lori discussed how the Montana chapter of the AAP has adopted a climate resolution, a resolution on climate change, to show that it's a problem that affects the health of children. She charged us, the state advocates, with taking this idea back to our home states. And here in Georgia, I'm lucky to have climate-minded colleagues and Leslie Rubin and Ann Mellinger-Birdsong who said, yeah, let's do this. Let's take this to our chapter AAP. And we have the amazing chapter leadership, including our current president, Terry McFadden, who gave us a slot to present to our board this past February. Now, the morning didn't quite start as I planned because it was the first time it snowed all winter in Georgia, and I wasn't sure if the board meeting was actually going to happen. But Terry assured me that if I came, it would happen and we would get a chance to present. And ultimately, despite the snow, the board voted in favor of our resolution. The resolution is really just the beginning, though. The current pandemic, as Jerry mentioned and Megan mentioned, has really made it clear that considerations of children are not always top of mind for policymakers. Yet there is just so much resonance with the complete disruption of their lives that our kids are facing now because of COVID-19 and the challenges that we have already and will continue to face from climate-related health threats, from climate-driven natural disasters. Preparedness and advocating for inclusion of the needs of children in preparedness is really more relevant than ever. Also, a lot of climate action is taking place at state and local levels. And as pediatricians, we have a role to play. We've always represented the voices of our children and our families. We've always helped advocate for them and with them. But often when these conversations about climate change are happening, we're at work in hospitals and in the clinic. We can't actually be at each and every meeting to advocate on behalf of our families. So the goal of these climate resolutions across our states are to amplify our voices, to empower our local partners who are advocating for action at the local level. So I'm happy to share the resolution and more detailed presentation that we used to present it. But to paraphrase what's on the slide here, climate change is real, it's now. It is a public health emergency, and children are disproportionately harmed. A lot of the things that we need to do to mitigate climate change have health benefits anyway. So one of the strategies we use is we link to the U.S. Call to Action on Climate, Health, and Equity, this policy action agenda that I'm sure many of you are familiar with and that dozens of organizations have signed. We really wanted to show our local chapter this isn't a fringe issue anymore. This is an increasingly integral component of so many professional societies, planning, and outreach platforms. Dozens of organizations, including the American Academy of Pediatrics, agree that climate change is a public health emergency that's already causing harm. We also wanted to link it directly to the health of our children in Georgia. So we talked about health threats that we are already facing here in Georgia. Increase in extreme heat and ozone concentration, days where we get code orange alerts saying that it's too dangerous, the air is of such poor quality that our children can't play outside. We linked to the wildfires we're seeing. Back in September of this year, we had a 300% increase in wildfires over just prior 5-year average. We linked it to inland and coastal flooding. The picture of the flood shows the road to Tybee Island, out to one of our barrier islands that is increasingly underwater. And we link to the extreme weather events, the hurricanes that we are already seeing both disrupt our daily lives and pose a burden on our healthcare systems. So the image on the left shows the path of Hurricane Michael, which caused more than $2 billion in damages just to our agriculture sector here in Georgia. And then the map on the right shows the evacuation routes, just a picture of the Google Maps. The more than 7 million people who were under evacuation orders during Hurricane Irma, and it's pretty easy to tell where they headed. They headed up towards Atlanta in our neighborhoods up here. So we resolved that our chapter recognizes that climate change threatens the health and well-being of our Georgia's children. We support climate education to protect child health. We endorse climate health and equity. The policy action agenda was one way we could link in to what's already being advocated for instead of having to reinvent that here. And we encourage our own institutions to bolster their resilience. Again, coronavirus is showing this is more important than ever, and also address their own carbon footprint. So as has been echoed for each speaker on this call, our voice, the voices of pediatricians, matter. We have a role here in this discussion. We can bring the conversation back to health, and particularly the health of children, make sure their voices are represented at this table. We can elevate the voices of our patients, and now more than ever, advocate alongside them, show the social and intergenerational justice issues at stake here. Thank you. And I'll turn it back over now.
Hi, I am Lisa Patel. Lori, were you going to talk in between?
No, Lisa, go ahead, please.
All right, so I wanted to do a shout out to Jerry's great image that he did of the Earth from the moon. I have a similar one. This was taken in 1990 by Voyager 1. It was an image made famous by Dr. Carl Sagan. And he famously said, "Our planet is a lonely speck in the great enveloping cosmic dark. In all this vastness, there's no hint that help will come from elsewhere to save us from ourselves. This distant image of our tiny world underscores our responsibility to deal more kindly with one another and to preserve and cherish the pale blue dot, the only home we've ever known." And this really resonates with me in terms of what we're going to talk about today, both in terms of our call as pediatricians to do all we can to protect our Earth, but also what Megan had said as well, very much resonated with me, is our obligation to treat each other with kindness and compassion through one of the greatest challenges we're living through with the COVID pandemic. So I'm going to talk very briefly about the two things that we're working on here in California. First is the Climate and Health Task Force, and then we're going to talk about Climate Health Now as well. First, I just want to acknowledge, I don't know if anybody else grew up on the Care Bears. The Care Bear stare is where the Care Bears would sit there all together and their bellies would shine light to answer any injustice. They would answer it with their love all together. And I would say the work that we've been able to do in California is really the result of an amazing team of people. So Amanda Milstein and Sarah Shearer, who are my task force co-chairs. And then Chris Calvin is our AAP California CEO, and Isra Uzzaman is our executive director for AP California One, and they've just been so supportive of every one of the actions that Amanda, Sarah, and I have wanted to take and really help propel our work forward. So the Climate and Health Task Force, Sarah, Amanda, and I created it last fall. The first thing we did was just sit down and write a mission statement, and I think all of these sentiments have been echoed in the prior presentation. So recognizing that climate change is a health emergency, that we need to decarbonize rapidly, really in the next 10 years if we're going to avert the worst of the effects of climate change. And as Megan had mentioned, equity has to be at the core of our efforts. We've seen the COVID pandemic really show how the disparities that exist in any of our solutions have to take that into account. Otherwise, we risk making them worse. The way we go about it is advocacy, education, and collaboration. And similar to Becca, within our chapter, we did two things. So within our chapter, when the US formally withdrew from the Paris Climate Agreement, we drafted a statement, Sarah Shear drafted a statement that our chapter approved as a statement that went up on our website that we're really proud of. And then we took the resolution that Lori Byron had done for Montana and adopted it for California. And California is unique because we have 4 chapters within a district. And for all 4 of our chapters, the district adopted this resolution to declare climate change a health emergency, which is also going up on the website today, is what we've heard. You know, echoing Megan's, Becca's point, you know, our voice matters to our chapter, and we have the ability to really elevate this issue. We've been told by both Chris and by Isra that this is the fastest they've ever taken an issue and made it an advocacy priority to the state because we were persistent. They might have meant annoying, but they're still returning our phone calls, so I'll take that as a win. The second thing we're really working on, a big part of our focus for this task force in particular, is education. So we actually got our executive director gives us a piece of the newsletter every time it goes out to talk about climate and you. And we use that as an opportunity to talk about action items, interesting webinars that have come up, and a way to get more member engagement and more people recruited to our committee. We're up to around 14 people now on our committee. And we've also been active with Dr. Aparna Bull has a list of basically different articles on healthy children that need updating or creating. And today, an article Amanda and I wrote on plant-based diet went live on the Healthy Children's website. So there's a real opportunity to contribute to materials that will populate in a lot of patients' ADSs in terms of important climate change information. The other one we worked on, obviously, is deeply relevant to us here in California, is wildfires. So we updated that with more emergency preparedness and really talking about it from the lens of climate change and why wildfires are getting it worse to put that connection in our patients' minds. What Lori was referring to is one of the subgroups that we've just established is one on education. So right now we're focusing around 2 buckets. One is going to be patient-facing materials. So one of the members of our subgroup, Dr. Maya Raghavan, is doing these really amazing surveys in Pittsburgh, where she's interviewing patients around their climate attitudes and what they would like to learn about in terms of how climate is going to affect their health. And we're hoping to use those materials, those results to build materials that answer a particular patient need. And then the other big bucket is the American Board of Pediatrics is very excited and welcomes us creating new information to meet MOC2 and MOC4 requirements that would focus on climate change. So the MOC4 would be a very typical come up with 3 or 4 articles, and then we'll develop questions. And so when you go to do your MOC, you can pick a climate change module to answer that. And then MOC4, another one of our subgroup members, Dr. Andrew Lewandowski, he does this great thing in his clinic where he screens all of his patients in the social history on climate change knowledge or needs, and uses that as an opportunity to do counseling. So we're talking about creating a QI project via MOC4, where you could introduce climate change questioning in your social history, and then you would get information and kind of skill building within that MOC module on how you answer your patients' questions to build clinicians' confidence in asking these questions and answering them as well for their patients. And then the last of our pillars is collaboration. So last fall, as we were establishing the AP Task Force, Amanda and Sarah also co-founded Climate Health Now, and we all work together on both organizations. The advantage of Climate Health Now is that we're really allying with physicians outside of just pediatrics and health professionals outside. So we have PAs, we have nurses, as well as part of the organization. And we really use that unified health voice to bring large groups of health professionals together quickly for when we need visible action items. So when Fire Drill Fridays were happening, we'd show up in our white coats to protest. We would go in groups to visit our representatives when action items came up for advocacy as well. And we find there's great power in all of us being together that way. Our catalyzing event was a training event that we put on in January, where we used the head, hearts, hands model for transformative change. And through that event, we invited the important partners, right? This work doesn't happen alone. And so it's so important to reach out to organizations that have been in the space for a long time and have been doing great work, like Physicians for Social Responsibility and Bay Area 350 and the Sunrise Movement. They all came and did a training with 100 people that showed up on a Saturday morning. From that event, we created a Slack channel for people to communicate, and we found there's an advantage and disadvantage to it. It is a new technology, and so some people struggle with it, but we found it's a great way to build informal connections very quickly on issues of passion. This is us at Climate Health Now at Nancy Pelosi's office. And we are Physicians for Social Responsibility had set on an action item to advocate for clean energy incentives in the year-end budget. And so we all went under the umbrella of Climate Health Now to advocate for that. And what we're finding is that we sort of wear both hats, you know, in terms of doing quick advocacy. Sometimes it can be harder to get that quick approval from your chapter, your district to go under the AAP banner. And so in those settings, it's nice to have Climate Health Now if we want to work quickly on something, but obviously having AAP behind you on issues is, for all the reasons that have been mentioned, there's great visibility, there's great credibility, so we continue to do that work as well in terms of our advocacy. Our priorities in terms of Climate Health Now, we did focus on divestment for a little bit, trying to focus on doing a divestment effort for the healthcare sector. COVID-19 happened, and so I think our focus for the rest of the year is going to be on the green stimulus, which Megan had mentioned. The green stimulus is really a menu of policy options that focus on, you know, a living wage that for households, on a just transition off fossil fuels, and really the focus is on building resilient systems that can deal with both the pandemic and with climate change. The thought behind the green stimulus is that this is really going to be the push after COVID-19 is over, but this is the time to advocate. So we're going to start meeting with our representatives to start pushing for the green stimulus here in California. What we've learned so far in terms of our short journey is that we know people crave connection. We know it from the pandemic, and we know it from our work as well. Back to what Megan had said about how there's that disconnect between how many people care and how many people you think care. So many health professionals have come up to us and said, I thought I was the only one. It's so great to be a part of this group. So, you know, reaching out to other people, you will find them, other people that are really activated and engaged on the topic. We know that health professionals are very activated on the subject as well. And back to Becca was saying, our voice really matters. Pediatricians are a very trusted voice. And we find that just showing up in our white coats really makes a difference. And then back to what Megan had said about, you know, how we navigate in the COVID-19 era, we have to show compassion to ourselves and to each other as well. COVID-19 feels like both a sledgehammer and slow drip water damage as well. I'm just coming off a shift myself. So I will say it's important for all of us to strike that balance. I think it's also really important to seek solutions to both crises. I look at COVID-19 like an acute condition that will kill you, and climate change as a chronic disease that will kill you. And both are important. And I think particularly in this time where people's emotional mind is really focused around COVID-19, it's important to honor that in our conversations. And then embrace uncertainty. I think as doctors, we're somewhat already trained in dealing with that. And this is like embracing to the maximum. So I think something we're struggling a lot with is that we don't know what the right solution is because we've never dealt with some of these issues before. But I really believe that if we stay true to our values and make that our true north, we cannot go wrong or get lost. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share our work.
Thank you all very, very much. I really, really appreciate all the work that everybody did to get today's event organized and all of the other things that you've done. We only have a minute or two for last thoughts and questions. So Megan, last thoughts from you, and then I've got one question that I'm going to bring up to the group.
Great. Thanks, Jerry. Thanks, everyone. I think we've shared a lot of actions you can take today, and I want to thank Rebecca and Lisa for really highlighting both the green stimulus and the U.S. call to action. There's, again, so much you can do, but you personally, as an individual, or even as an organization, can go to climatehealthaction.org today and sign the U.S. call to action. You can read the full policy action agenda. AAP has signed on to it. Eco America has signed on to it. Hundreds of organizations have signed on to it. And it's really a call to on government, business, and civil society leaders and elected officials to recognize climate change as a health emergency and to work across government agencies and communities to prioritize climate health and equity. So please do have a look and sign on. And of course, think about climate in your voting this this November, and in Children's Health Month in October, what you can do to raise awareness on this issue. So why don't we open the Q&A now?
Great. Here's the question that we just have time for. We've got 4 minutes left. So I'm going to direct this to both Becca and Lisa. One thing that you would want the pediatricians and others on this call today to do as a result of this webinar. So first Becca and then Lisa.
Sure, thanks, Jerry. I think the one thing is to just go for it, to take the next step, to connect with people at your local chapter and find the next thing for wherever you are. For some states, that may be the climate resolution. For other chapters, that may be organizing towards that point and finding other folks to help out with it. And for those of us that have newly adopted our resolutions, it's finding partners, that intersectoral collaboration that we can work with towards achieving change. I'll turn it over to Lisa.
I'd say, it's so variable from state to state. I mean, in California, we just have so many people activated on the issue. But I think what's most important, particularly if you're new to the issue, is to find other folks that have been in this fight for a while. And whether that's through your chapter or there are other great organizations like Physicians for Social Responsibility, Citizens Climate Lobby, 350.org. But if you are in a state or in an area where you don't have a lot of other pediatricians necessarily to work with, I think it's important to find your allies where you can find them. And then if you're in a state where you do happen to have other pediatricians you can work with, yeah, welcome, come on in. That'd be great.
For anybody on the panel, any specific advice that you would give to the non-pediatricians who are on this call to participate in the climate and health discussion? Megan, do you want to field that one, please?
Sure. There are so many people at the local and national levels who are wanting to do something about climate. They haven't led on it before, but they're so concerned that they're bringing their leadership forward on this issue. As mentioned earlier, we work with local communities. This is our Path to Positive program, and we also work with faith leaders through our Blessed Tomorrow program. And they, each one of those constituencies are looking for others to join them in collaborating on climate action. We know that electeds need to hear from their constituents. When health and faith leaders can come forward and the shared moral call for action is very powerful and relevant for them, and not only locally, but statewide as well as nationally. We hear from the electeds that we work with that they need to hear from their citizens. It's really, they don't hear from them enough. And so, you know, we really work towards helping folks to not only accelerate their leadership within their sector, but also to connect across sectors. They can form those relationships, just like Lisa was talking about. Find people who, you know, who have worked on this issue, who are wanting to work on this issue, and find ways to collaborate. And so what's one of the reasons we bring people together in our convenings like our summit. But certainly I encourage you to really seek, you know, seek those other leaders in your community. They're out there, and you can find them. And then certainly if you're interested, you can give us a call as well.
So in closing, I want to thank everybody who participated today. I want to thank everybody who made this event possible. I've got the thank you slide back up there, and I'm not going to read all the names. You know, we are living in the time of coronavirus, a very severe, hopefully short-term, relatively short-term and acute problem, and we are living in the time of climate change. Each of these problems need our hard work, and I think that today's presentation hopefully has given all of you ideas of people with whom you can collaborate and activities that you can undertake to make this world a better place for all human beings, most importantly, kids and the future generations that pediatricians hold so dear. So with that, I will close this webinar on Earth Day 50 and thank everyone for participating. Take care all. Be safe out there. Stay sane.
Thanks, everyone.